morning, I'm Tanya Eiserer, an investigative reporter here at Channel 8, back for day 7 of the Ken Paxton impeachment trial, where I think in the next day or two we're going to find out what these senators who are acting as jurors are going to decide in this case. They are making a decision on 16 impeachment articles to decide whether or not they'll sustain one or more or not. So I'm joined today by Victor Vital.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. Victor is a longtime defense attorney. You're also a prosecutor, right?
A prosecutor. I try cases.
Right, and he was involved in the Don Hill corruption case.
Wow, that was many moons ago when I was much skinnier. And well,
join the club. But you represented Sheila Farrington Hill, who was his wife, and so you have lots of knowledge about public corruption or allegations of public corruption.
Absolutely.
And of course, we have Bud Kennedy. I mean, it's a race between you and Bernadine. You know, who's more knowledgeable? I mean,
Bernadine's got all the politics covered. I just try to fill in around the edges.
Okay. That's a really diplomatic answer, Bud. Very diplomatic. So yesterday we had, the highlight of the day had to have been Brandon Kamek. Brandon Kamek is this young attorney who had little experience, no prosecutorial experience, who gets hired to investigate these allegations. Victor, so you've been a prosecutor, as you said. How unusual would it be for a prosecutor, as Brandon Kamek described, to go out with the lawyer of one of the parties to deliver subpoenas?
I'll just say it this way. Should have been a red flag. Red flags were going up all over the place.
Yeah, and I think he describes in his testimony that he thought it was, he felt pressured by Michael Wynn, who was representing Nate Paul, to go out with him to deliver these subpoenas. And it's interesting because he actually taped these encounters. There's audio recordings of him going out to deliver these to these banks, and these banks were part of the lawsuits connected to the Mitty Foundation. The Mitty Foundation was this charitable organization that Nate Paul was locked in a battle with. And ultimately, Brandon Kamek doesn't get paid.
That's the lesson. Pay your lawyer or you'll see him in court.
And the other lesson for lawyers and seasoned lawyers like me know this, make sure you get your retainer up front.
Exactly. And so, he is, typically, if you were going to hire somebody to carry out a public corruption investigation, would you hire a guy with not very many years experience and who'd never worked as a prosecutor and didn't know how to do a subpoena?
Absolutely you wouldn't. And again, I go back to what I said about red flags. That should have been the red flag for the fella who's being approached. Why am I being approached? I'm not in this world. I don't have any experience here. Why wouldn't they go to a more seasoned, experienced person who has knowledge of the subject matter?
And then he's working it all as a side gig. He's got
he's got his DWI
cell phone
case.
numbers. Yeah, but he's got all he's getting from the AG's office is separate, unidentified cell phone numbers. They won't give him any kind of badge or credential. He's getting no official communication whatsoever. Just these, surreptitious messages over, the apps that you use that are
Signal.
Signal.
The Attorney General of the state of Texas tells him to download the Signal app.
Right. So, it's all this side deal. He's getting treated like someone you're having an affair with, but that's a different story.
Right.
Well, we do have that story going on in this trial as well.
Not very much, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. But they haven't gotten into at all this allegations of the renovation and what was paid. What do you think's going on here? What's the strategy?
I think it's interesting, Victor, you'll have to address this, but to me it's interesting how little we've seen of all the mountains of discussion of fake, Uber accounts and burner phones and the whole house remodeling, and it just seems to me like maybe they're focusing on a few articles that seem simple to explain to the senators. But what do you make of the fact that of all the allegations and discussion before the trial, we haven't really seen much about even about the affair?
Maybe we'll see that today. What I will say, however, is typically in a case with this many articles, or if this were an indictment, it would be counts, the trial would be much longer. and you would have much more time to unravel and delve into the allegations. So perhaps that's what we're seeing here. There's a lot to cover in a truncated period of time.
Right, and so when they started the day yesterday, which was a long day, and thank you for you folks out there that stuck with us for most of it, because it was long. They started, the prosecution had a little over 9 hours, and the defense had a little over 12. So, I mean, I'm ballparking that probably they each have half of that now, roughly. I mean, I assume that Lieutenant Governor Patrick will announce this morning where we stand on timelines, but it feels like we're going to end testimony probably today, maybe early tomorrow. It kind of feels like by tomorrow afternoon, this will be in the hands of the Senate jurors.
Absolutely. We'll get to see closing arguments, which is one of my favorite things to watch, and more importantly, deliver.
I think you wrap up the testimony today if you can, even if you go till 6:30 or 7, then you have closing tomorrow and put it in the hands of the senators, which that'll be interesting when they send it to the jury, because this is not like a typical jury where a foreman has to bring everybody to a consensus. All they have to do is vote, and they may want to review some evidence, but they don't have to be unanimous. They don't even have to discuss it very much.
Right.
I don't think we'll have a long deliberation.
Well, you know, and I'm always wrong about these things, so I'm going to preface it by saying that my instincts are that by Friday afternoon we'll know one way or the other.
Typically that happens. I mean, when jurors get cases closer to the end of the week, they don't want to go into the weekend. They don't want to have to come back. However, these are politicians, so I have to leave to Bud what their
I'd like to know what their flight schedules are.
Well,
that would tell us a lot.
The driving force in this discussion, when originally when Lieutenant Governor Patrick was talking about a 4 to 5 week trial, everyone said, no, we got to be free on Texas OU weekend, because they all had fundraisers on Texas OU weekend. So they definitely didn't want any risk of it lapping over. So this weekend, what I think A&M plays Louisiana Monroe or somebody.
Yeah, I looked it up for you.
Yeah,
I don't pay
you.
much attention to football.
And it's UT and Wyoming, but they're still going to be involved in those games. Everybody's going to have their football game to go to Saturday. So I doubt the Senate's going to debate into Saturday afternoon.
No, and I do think that the time constraints have really hampered the prosecution.
I agree.
They really have. And one of the strategies from the defense seems to have been a whole lot of objections, because it felt like, at least from my perspective, that it was breaking the flow. Victor talked about the strategy there.
Absolutely. So particularly when you're in court, you want to be very judicious with the objections that you lodge. You want to be thoughtful. Is the objection going to be a meaningful objection? Will it be sustained? Do I really need it to sustain error on appeal? Here, I believe the strategy really is an obstructionist strategy, and the objections really kind of broke the flow. I thought about the testimony of Missy Carey the other day, and it certainly broke the flow. So it's a good strategy to lodge objections, and many of the objections are being sustained.
How do you feel like Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is doing in his 7 days as a judge? I mean, he's very young in his career as a judge.
Well, he comes off very judge-like when he's at bench conferences or taking objections, ruling on objections, except for the fact that I know he is not a sitting judge. I mean, he demeans himself as such.
Do you think he's doing okay?
I think so.
I think he's gotten better. I do think sometimes on the objections and hearsay, it seems like a basketball game jump ball where you have an arrow that points this way and then turns this way. It seems like he alternates, but generally I think that he's improved since his rocky first couple of days. It's very difficult for him. He's in a difficult situation politically. He's obviously very aligned with the Attorney General and his supporters, but his main goal is to lead the Senate and to be sure that the Senate completes this in a professional and business-like manner, and to come off with him looking good and to get his senators reelected. So have them all come off looking good. So I think he's conducted himself in a reputable way.
Any
prognostications of where we're going to end up here?
I never try to read tea leaves. Take it one moment at a time when you're a trial lawyer, and we'll hopefully see some good testimony today, and we'll get closer to being able to predict what will happen, but I'm not in a position to predict at this point. I've certainly been wrong many times when I try to do that.
Oh, I'm always wrong. Always.
Before the trial, I did not think that we would get this far. I thought that the opening motions would end the would end the whole trial. After the opening motions, I thought, well, maybe there's a chance. But I think what we've heard, I think that some of the jurors, the senators who have their doubts, will say that we've heard a lot of smoke but no fire. We haven't seen the fire. We haven't seen the conspiracy. We haven't seen exactly what, they haven't shown us what Ken Paxton got for all this. Did he get money? What did he get? What did he gain? They've left out a lot of the things that they claim the advantage that Ken Paxton had.
Which is the problem with the timelines.
Right. So they haven't gotten around exactly what Ken Paxton got for all this. So I think that that there are a couple of articles that the prosecution's focusing on that I think might be sustained. But I think in general I will be surprised. I don't think they can get there and get the 2/3 majority to remove.
I think it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, it's within a vote or two. You look at those senators sitting out there, it's within a vote or two. Mm-hmm. You have to understand, I'm sorry, Tanya.
No, you go ahead. You're the political guy.
Well, you have to understand these senators are serving 3 constituencies right now. They're serving their voters, many of whom have strong feelings about this case, some of whom have strong feelings in favor of the Attorney General, even in districts where the senator may be willing to listen to the case. So they're serving their voters. They're serving Dan Patrick, who presides over the chamber. They can't pass any bills if Dan Patrick doesn't like them. Everything they do has to be filtered around, is Dan going to let me do this? And then they have to serve Governor Abbott, because if Governor Abbott vetoes a bill that they write, then it'll never get anywhere. So they are trying to get bills passed and get reelected. And those are their primary concern.
Victor, given the conduct that we've heard described, assuming this turns out the way, that he's not removed from office, what happens then? I mean, what have we said in terms of the kind of conduct that's okay?
Well, you're talking about, or I don't know if you're asking about it, but when I hear your question, I think about history and precedent. I think that this case will set an important precedent for what is impeachable or not. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when none of us are here, people will look back on this case, and as they're assessing whether to issue articles of impeachment, they'll talk about this case, they'll talk about the proof, what was or was not sufficient.
And again, I'm not going to comment on what I think should happen or shouldn't happen, because that's not my role, but I have covered law enforcement and the criminal justice system for a long time, 30 years, and the conduct that we have heard described here is incredibly troubling, and it cannot be okay. Whether or not he should be removed for it, that's a different matter. That's up to the Senate jurors to decide. But I would hope that Ken Paxton would take a long, hard look internally and maybe change and say, I want to do things differently. But we cannot have an attorney general who is, by all the accounts we're hearing from these people who were his hand-picked lieutenants, some of whom sued, some of whom didn't, and say that the conduct that's been described here is just all right, because it's not. We should expect better. There's nothing wrong with expecting better from our public officials, and that to me is, as someone who believes in our system and believes in our system of government and all the things that make America great, I think we need to hold our public officials to a higher standard of accountability, whether they are Democrats, whether they are Republicans. I don't care who they are. And I covered, in my career as a reporter, I've been pretty much an equal opportunity offender regardless of the person's party. I covered when Craig Watkins who was the Democratic district attorney here in Dallas County. I was the reporter who broke the story about the misuse of forfeiture funds to pay for the accident, which was played a huge role in his not winning re-election. And I didn't care about his party. I don't care about party. I care about what is right. And I know I'm a little on my soapbox here this morning, but I just think that we should demand accountability regardless of party.
Well,
So-
Tanya, you're wanting us to care about principle, but right now
Bailiff,
we have a
please bring in the
faction
jury.
that cares about team. They want you to vote with Team Trump and not necessarily on principle.
Okay, guys, we're going to dip in. They're getting started.